o'clock in the evening, every bastard there was pissing pretty well gone away. There's nothing left to say. Farewell to New York City boys, the Boston and PA. He took them out with a well and clout, and I often heard him say, I'm a free-born man of the USA.
So what was life like growing up as an Irish American in New York? I mean, was there a sense of Irishness instilled in you from a young age, and were you aware of this little island, Ireland, on the fringes of the Atlantic Ocean?
Oh my God, of course. Yeah, this was home. This was what my parents always referred to as home. And we would go back every year. And in all of those travels, we came to become really between the two countries, you know? In Irish, they call it Idir Gach Yankacha, like between the two languages, and Idir Gach culture. And I think that's what the experience is for the children of the immigrants anyway, you know? So my parents are deeply involved in Irish language Irish music circles, Irish cultural circles. And they raised us in those communities in America and over here. Mm-hmm. We worked in a sweet shop in Ballymahan, and my grandmother's cottage in Ballymcgilligan in County Kerry. And, and my father's from Dublin originally, but his people are from Clare. And okay. So the country has always been, our home. And so all my family live here, except for my parents, whom I'm still trying to get to move back.
Okay.
They're the last people in America with my brother.
So you were traveling back and forward regularly then. Okay. And how did you find that growing up as a kid or even a teenager? Were you quite happy to accept, all that Irish influence, or did you rebel against it? Or
I suppose, yeah, maybe. But for the most part, it was our community. So New York is often organized in terms of communities, and our community was the Irish community. So it gave us the bridge to talk to everyone else, though. Like I never identified as white because I always identified in the way my neighbors would. So my neighbors would identify ethnically, and so we did too. So we were the Irish family.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's how it was, and then there's great Irish neighborhoods in New York. We have a Gaelic park in the Bronx. There was a Gaelic park at the very tip of Manhattan. Mm-hmm. So the park around the corner from where I live is called O'Connor Park. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was steeped with Irish people for generations. The first governor of New York was the Earl of Limerick. His name is Thomas Dongan, and I'm Catholic, and he actually incorporated the first Charter of Liberties in the Americas based on the Irish Parliament.
Okay, yeah.
It's an ancient link between New York and Ireland. And St. Patrick's Cathedral, of course, is on Fifth Avenue. So
yeah. And is that connection still as strong today, or? The
last two police chiefs of New York, like the current police chief is named O'Shea, mm-hmm. and the police chief before him was named O'Neill. Before that, it was Ray. I'm forgetting I've met a number of Irish. Yeah, it's a very Irish city still.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So if I paid a trip to New York, then I'd feel right at home in some blocks or community areas of the city, I guess.
Oh my God, you'd be very welcome. Yeah.
Good. So what about then the stereotypical idea of the returned Yank? Like Irish people, they kind of they sometimes laugh at the fake Irish American, and maybe the stereotypical idea of the dumb Yank, it doesn't know anything about Ireland really. You often read it like Irish people sometimes take the piss or take the mick out of the Irish Americans. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Bad lad for a Yank.
Oh wow. Well, I don't think I'm deficient intellectually, so I wouldn't respond favorably to someone calling me names. But if someone does that, I'll say something back. I haven't had the experience really, but I know that there's differences of speech. My Irish has a bit of an American flavor to it. So when I'm speaking Irish, I understand that I'm not speaking as fluently as other speakers. And so there's some patience that's required sometimes with that. and the American accent has a different feeling to it than the Irish. I know that there's a sort of Kjolwar, leis go na nail. Like when the Irish speak, there might be maybe a sort of musicality that the American accent doesn't quite hit. So, and I know I'm a New Yorker too, so, I'm a cosmopolitan, sophisticated, tough guy. So basically, I know that I intimidate some people.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know also that, there's just differences, but
Yeah.
the differences are the same between a Donegal person and someone from Dublin. Like, a Jack Keane has a different take on Connemara than maybe I do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's time that the Irish sort of recognize the diaspora again and stop thinking insularly and understand that our ethnicity is a large complex that is to be found in Ireland and America and Australia and New Zealand, and that these different Irish communities are connected deeply. Like, to not do that is to lose our heritage. We have a heritage that we have a cathedral on Fifth Avenue. It's called St. Patrick's Cathedral. That's an Irish building. It's one of the greatest pieces of Irish architecture that we've ever built. And I would not want the Irish to lose that connection. They have a claim to that. But also, I have a very deep civil right and legal right to claim my Irishness. I'm an Irish citizen like you are, and legally, there's really no difference between us. In terms of culture, I recognize there are cultural differences. I think the biggest loss for an Irish American is that we don't grow up learning Irish in the schools, and that we don't have a connection to the Gael Skelena, and we don't have the experience of the Skill Saura, or we don't have the network of friendship connections that come from the Irish school system. And so there's that loss. But yeah, not to give you such a long answer. I guess you're poking at some kind of. There's a main. I think one of the biggest crises in Irish identity is the disconnection between Irish people and the Irish diaspora. The misunderstanding is very unhelpful. And to be honest, and not to go on, but I think the difference is fostered. I think that Irish people and Irish Americans are alienated from each other by some kind of programming, by some kind of media complex that divides us, where we weren't as divided before. But I don't know.
No, I mean, I do feel it does piss me off that sometimes you read it in the media and they tend to take the piss out of the Irish Americans. And like, as I said, from my mother's side now and her American relatives, and believe me, they're well clued into Ireland and and its ways, and they return on a regular basis, and they're no mugs. They know like what it is to be Irish, and it kind of annoys me that when I read things about the American Irish Americans don't know what they're talking about when it comes to Ireland. They do. A lot of them do.
I also had the experience of Irish Americans not knowing, and I know what that feels like. But there's a reciprocation. I mean, Irish people in Ireland, Irish people, are largely imitating American culture. So I think that the imitation of American culture is the source of a lot of that anxiety. So in other words, because Irish people are in fact imitating American culture and assimilating into American culture, which I find very problematic and sad, but I understand why they're doing it. They're basically, in some ways, Irish Americans themselves. And so not wanting to admit how Americanized they are, I think they need to make a distinction that is rhetorical and emphatic, but not as true as maybe they might want it to be.
Yeah.
Just speaking with an Irish accent, and not even as strong. I mean, the Irish accent's very faded now. It's almost indistinguishable from other accents.
I know.
And he said, "Oh, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be, off sailing around the world." And and you kind of think, "Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh well, not to worry." But then in a way, he came back earlier than expected. So So then
Yeah.
our paths crossed again.
That's pretty much what happened. I came home briefly I was working on a yacht and I was sailing around the Caribbean, working very hard. And I came home briefly on my way to my first career as such, which was fashion photography in Paris. And we met briefly then, and I think we struck a chord.
You know, the idea of an Irish culture. So that's why in a lot of Irish Americans that I respect, really study Irish identity, the culture, the music, the language, and the literature. And in that cultural study, we recognize that Irishness is really about the Seanchais. Irishness is the old literature and canon that we have, and understanding our Seanchais is really much more important than, you know, being plopped out on some hospital bed when you're an infant born, and where that is less important really than your spiritual, ethnic, or religious. To me, it's like religious, ethnic connection. To me, it's like our Seanchais, our tradition is my religion. I mean, I found God through St. Patrick. You know, he's my patron saint. You know, I'm named for him. I'm named for the Irish saints. It's through the Irish saints and the literature of my people that I found my spirituality. You know, so I think that's much more important than these sort of, you know, facadist. I mean, Ireland is very plastic paddy. You know, Ireland is really the source of plastic paddiness. You know, if you come to Ireland, it's like everything Irish is presented plasticky. It's sort of superficiality that I think is really coming from the Irish here, and it's not across the board. But it's very strong in the cities, for example.
Well, you're right. I mean, it's funny that we would laugh at the Irish in England, or Irish in America, or Irish Australia with all this like paddy whackery, but we play it up. I mean, Irish people go abroad, like, you know, and the first thing they go is the Irish pub, and like these Irish pubs, come on, they're so fake, you know.
Yeah, and fake. You know, when I first came to Ireland in the '90s during the Celtic Tiger, it was the period when they were ripping all the mahogany bars out of Dublin, and they were just destroying pub after pub, all these beautifully authentic mahogany bars and pubs, and you know, and they replaced them with this sort of like American cliche. They took like this sort of, you know, and in who's plastic in doing that? A lot of these bars, ironically, were packed up into boxes, the woodwork, and then reconstructed in American towns. Like, so,
yeah. Well, you see it in sport when Irish fans go abroad and they all dress up as leprechauns and everything, you know. So, I mean, like, how long have you been living in Ireland, Brendan?
I moved here in 1999, and I've been in Galway. So I lived in Dublin first, and then I went to Kerry, and about 6 years ago, I came to Galway, and I've been living in Connemara for the last 3 years.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent. Yeah. And has Ireland lived up to your expectations?
Oh, I mean, I just always have a deep graw for Ireland. I love this country. It is, to me, a spiritual homeland. Like, I literally see in Ireland the land of saints and scholars. I have that eye for Ireland. I have that interest in her, and I try to protect her in that way, you know. And I think it's a spiritual battle at the end of the day, because a lot of what is so beautiful about Ireland is assaulted and destroyed and attacked. So, you know, it's that part of it is difficult, I think, you know.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
And if I had to pin you down, then, I mean, how would you define yourself? I mean, is it Irish, Irish American, Irish Catholic? I mean, how do you define yourself?
Religiously, I'm an Irish Catholic.
Okay.
That's how I describe my religion. That's my faith. Which means I'm a Roman Catholic, but I really think it's Irish Catholic. Like Saint Patrick is my saint, and I think from that tradition I discovered Irish literature, and so Irish literature is the road to Bohemianism that I followed, and it came out of that same corpus of literature. It's also the same literature that gave me access to Celtic mythology, and so I have a deep interest in Gaelic gods and the Tuatha De Danann and so the whole Dinhanicus of the Irish landscape, the map of Ireland is to me a spiritual thing. So I'm an Irish Catholic, but in America that's how I'd identify myself. But when it comes to census categories, I'm an Irish American, you know. So that's what we call ourselves. That's what
Yeah. So let's just go on to the Irish language then, Brendan, if that's okay.
My mother is from Kerry, just from the Dingle Peninsula, but further out in Castle Island, in a place called Ballymagilligan, Ballymagilligodge, and near Tralee. And her mother was an Irish speaker, and her father didn't speak Irish. My grandfather, Paddy O'Shea. And so Irish waned in my mother's generation, so they didn't speak it at home as much.
So how did you get to practice it then, or how did you?
My mother gave me an ear for Irish because her accent is very, very strong Kerry accent. So I have a very strong Hiberno-English ear, or Anglo-Gaelic ear, I call it. And my father taught me his school Irish. He was the first person to write out Irish for me. And so I started getting an interest from them. And from that, I met a teacher from Achill Island, Achill, and she had started a school in New York. And during high school years, my secondary school years, I started studying it intensely, and it was difficult. It's very difficult if you don't have a community to practice with. So, you know, yeah. So I've been at it ever since, but you know, it goes up and down in terms of how deep you get into it. Yeah.
And I guess living in Connemara, then you can practice it regularly. You speak it every day, I'd imagine.
In the household, we speak nothing but Irish.
Okay.
At the shops, I speak nothing but Irish. You know, but Rossmuck has become depopulated, and it's a wonderful place. But you know, it was one of the most densely packed places in Europe.
Okay.
It's since it's not as many people here, so you know the opportunities to practice are not as many as I would want, to be honest.
Okay.
The dynamic has been when you bring Anglophones into an Irish-speaking area, what happens is there's a number, and the number shifts. So if you have one in a group of, like if I'm on the bus and there's young people around, they'll all speak Irish, and it's fascinating. But if one of their schoolmates speaks English and doesn't speak Irish as well as they do because they're Gaelgori, they'll all shift their language to accommodate that person. So, yeah, I would say that it's not a good idea to encourage Anglophones into the Gaeltachta. I would say that it'd be better that, you know, the Gaeltachta be reserved for people who use the language. You know.
Okay. Why do you think Irish people can't really grasp the language? I mean, we learn it in school 12 years or more, and we're still pretty woeful at it. I mean, what's your take on that?
Oh, well, I mean, I believe that the language is suffering a slow kill policy, to be honest with you. Not to be too controversial, but I believe that there's an agenda to kill Irish off. And the way you can kill Irish off slowly without being responsible for the murder is you convince the people to feel badly about it. And so, you know, if you ask Irish people about Irish, they'll say the same cliches. They'll say, "Oh, it was taught badly," or the cliche, "It's raining in Ireland." You know, there's like all these like little cliches that Irish people use, and they're sort of inculcated into the culture here, and it's sort of like this sort of excusism as to why. But besides that, I think there is an excusism. Besides that, I think that it's defacilitated. Much more importantly, I think Irish is defacilitated. And if the Irish government was serious about making Irish a national language, it could have done it years and years ago, and it could do it in the morning. The entire attitude to Irish would change if the government would just facilitate it. So, for example, I'll give you one example, and I'll stop going on so much.
That's okay.
There's the Gaelic is the phenomenon where parents want their children to go to an Irish immersion school. So you have an overwhelming desire by Irish parents and children to be immersed in an Irish language schooling experience. They want it. There's no forcing it at all. It's by volunteer numbers alone. Irish people in hundreds of thousands of people right now want to go to Gaelscoileanna, but they're denied access to the Gaelscoileanna. So I think that if you were just to change that one law and say if someone applies to a Gaelscoileanna, it is illegal to deny them access.
Gaelic schools have a very good reputation and they do produce results. But yeah, it is a kind of a closed system in that regard. I lived in Wales for a bit, and the Welsh are really proud of their language. I mean, and it's young and old, and you can hear it regularly, which is fantastic. And they don't, it's like Irish people they're kind of ashamed of the language, or I think they're ashamed of themselves for not knowing the language, and then it's easier to belittle the language rather than take responsibility for not learning it.
But in Wales, the difference between Wales and Ireland, Wales has free language classes. So if you're a Welsh citizen, you have a right to take a Welsh language class for free, Sarah Nashka. So in Ireland, you have to pay hundreds of euro to participate in a language class that might not even be at your level. When I say facilitation, I mean the government should be providing through Irish language organizations spaces in the cities where people can gather to learn the language as adults, and the children should never, ever be denied access to a Gaelscoil if they apply to go to one. To deny an Irish child an immersive education through Irish is to violate their fundamental civil right to acquire the national first language of this country. It's a scandal that one child has been denied. Any child denied is a scandal. And then the other scandal is to deny children who go to a bunskill access to a secondary school or a meon school. To say that they can't continue their education from primary school into secondary school through Irish is another. It's a scandal to me. It's proof that the government is killing the language slowly.
Yeah, well, it's just a scandal on top of scandal on top of scandal in Ireland. It's just one after the other. I mean, I wouldn't know if they're doing it on purpose. It's just that, like, it's everything in Ireland they do arseways. So,
Yeah, I think there's external influences. I think Ireland is the target of interference, and there's people that don't want Ireland to exist, that exert way too much power here, and they have influenced way too many politicians, and so Ireland is under attack culturally, and it has spiritual but also has economic repercussions.
Well, you see the people that are running the country. I mean, Vardaker, Coveney, Harris, etc., etc. They're not people you could relate to on a human level, you know. They're robotic. They're mathematically minded. It's all about figures and numbers and percentages and GDPs, etc. I mean, they're not like. I don't think Irish people our soul is that way inclined. We're more creative people. We need thinkers, real creative people running the country, and see things in a different vision. You know, I mean,
Yeah, it's a vocation to. I think the problem with politics is that it's populated by politicians. You know, I mean, really, it's a spiritual purpose. If you're leading a country, it's like being a spiritual leader.
yeah,
You know, and I think you need people whose dedication to their job is one that they'd rather die than betray the Irish people. That they're like a captain; they'd rather go down with the ship than jump off it before anyone else. And I think a lot of politicians have jumped off the ship. I think they're letting Ireland sink while they row off into some other security, and it's a betrayal of Irish people. And I think we need braver, more principled people to stand up to these infiltrators that are trying to basically undermine the safety of Ireland. You know?
yeah. With the Irish, I mean, how would you like? You can use the Irish in an everyday setting because you live in Connemara, but what about like getting people to use it more often in everyday situations? Because there doesn't seem to be, I mean, there's zero practical application anywhere in most places, like in cities, in Dublin, Galway, I don't know, like, I mean, how once you have the language, how would you go about getting people to use it more often in everyday situations?
Bromor nach bhfuil Gaeilge níos fá. Honnig may go heron in a.
No, I'm sorry. Don't understand anything you're saying. What do you want to drink?
6 years awak. Agus can I make jockwood? Cad is anam dit.
You mean it's anam dum. Honnig may in a on chin.
In ye. Agus Lorian to Gaeilge.
Donna may on tanga ma ba watlum vega machoni in Erin. Ach, nimmer quid Gaeilge go ma. Ni higgin anya cad derum.
Sean, 2 points, please.
Yeah.
Caught my shavy ag from Gaeilge. Or cap'n go butune. Better nafs mean if my.
Tom, Gaeilge níos faragad. No, I can quit this Modena so here, sure.
Ni higgum.
Loriter Berla on Shaw.
Berla?
Berla. O Hasna.
Ni la read her Gaeilge.
Ní Loriter.
Ach, gach fogwer.
Well, tá teang aún ach ní Loriter ach I gúpla gaunternering.
Here, did you know that El Paddy could speak Chinese?
Yeah, it was exactly. We're on the same wavelength. I started a project called the Urban Gaeltacht. So the idea of an urban Gaeltacht is what we need to get into people's heads. We need Irish neighborhoods to dedicate themselves to using the language in the shops and in the homes and bring clusters of Irish speakers together. And it can be done. And we had a proposal before the Galway City Council, and they were enthusiastic for converting Nuns Island, which is this area of Galway, into such a zone. And it's a possibility. This can happen. These kinds of projects can happen. We just need support. We just need people to not betray these projects and to let them grow and to let them become popular, you know?
Okay. What are we missing by not speaking our language? Now, I mentioned before in a video I did with Irish Identitarian, and we were talking about the language, and I gave the example when I was teaching in Korea and China, and I was teaching English, and many of my students, they were telling me afterwards that learning English, it opened up a more creative side in their brain, which was perhaps closed off within their own language, and East Asians would not be as analytical and probably more mathematical and mechanical. I mean, so it's amazing when you think of it. Just by them learning English, they're more creative and they can think about things in a different light. I mean, so what are we losing by not speaking our own language?
Oh, so much. I mean, one of the great pleasures of Ireland is the language is everywhere in the place names. So when you walk around or you drive around, you can read the language and you can live in a book. Like Ireland has been described as like a palimpsest, which is like a layered manuscript, and you can live in literature. Like Irish literature is like on the ground, it's in the landscape. And then once you take the language, it brings you somewhere else. It can bring you into the mythological world. It can bring you into a landscape that is deeply literary. You can visit Slieve Bloom and find the place where Finn McCool was trained to become a Fenian by his aunt and his other auntie, who were druids. So this idea of a landscape that is alive with the language is one thing that we miss. The other thing we miss is the secrets. It's such a pleasure to be able to say a few words in Irish, and then other people who don't speak it have this sense of, oh, you guys have like a different version. It's so cool, and it's a wonderful way to. I think one thing that Irish speakers or Irish people generally should bring back is we should say diaglach to each other and dias moraglach, because there's this sort of secularization, so no one wants to say God to you. But if you just think of it as like a very nice thing to have, Gura Mahad, Gura Mil Mahad, Mila Buichas. Like if we use salutations, it's like Italian. What's like buono. Like every visitor to Italy knows buono, buon bene. Like that kind of stuff. Like mo bellissimo, like that kind of thing. Like we have Gahalin, Tashe Gahalin, Ain't Fad. Like we can say lovely things too, and we don't have to speak Marcino Klein Crane the Killer, but we can say a few banachti. We have a few banachti that we can give each other. And the lovely thing about Irish too is it's full of holiness. It's full of spiritual beatification. I banacht. Like we have, like it's a tanganefa. It's a holy language. It's such a pleasure to use it. And when people use it with me, I love to encourage it, because it creates like a conspiracy between us. It's like we know, but maybe they don't know, and that's a lovely feeling actually. It's and then it's something you can share with everyone. Then you have people from every culture who want to learn it, and then you have like, oh sure, I've some of my best pleasures of Irish have been teaching people the language, and and that comes from every culture. And that's another thing. It's a resource. It's an economic resource too. I mean, to brand names, to use the Irish language in branding. We have like our own lettering system. We have a beautiful marketing resource right there, and everyone already has this great association with our branding. Like Irish language, the Gaelic, they call it Clo Gaelach, the Irish script. The Irish words, they make great gifts. They make great products. We could have entire cities just like blooming with Irish language and Irish script and Irish, aesthetics. And we're losing a lot. We're losing.
Yeah, well, that's very positive. I mean, there's a lot of good ideas for that, Brendan. Like even when you're talking about using the words, even small words, and like amongst your friends, or like with the Gaelic club here, where I am in Switzerland, we decided to use at least 10 words in training. Like I don't know, what could I say? Like what's a cool? Isn't it cool? Isn't it? I don't know. I can't remember any of them.
Cool on tea, like
yeah, and all those kind of things. So. Yeah. I don't go to many trainings, so.
Oh, cool. It's really cool. Like for example, you can. I understand very well the feeling of burha, like the worry, they fui brew, to be like worried, in using even a few words. I understand that feeling. I understand what it feels like to not feel comfortable to speak the language or to try. And I know what it's like to just, it's like Irish people are very musical anyway. So to use something that would stutter the musicality is, you'd want to avoid it. It's like, why would I go to use words that might make me stutter when if I just say it directly in English, it's more me. It feels more. So I understand that hesitation, and I'm very sympathetic to it. That could be overcome if we had more of a presence. If Irish was more in the landscape of our cities, then it would be ever present and we would use it much more. We would feel more comfortable, it would be more available to us.
Connor, chunas atá tú?
Chunas atá tú, tá mé go híntach.
Bhfuil tú ag sú leis an thread?
Tá mé ag sú leis an thread. Yeah, I am looking forward to the fight, 100%.
Agus céird atá le ráid fí Jose Aldo, what would you say about him as Gaeilge, más féidir? Don't worry, I don't have my cúna Donna, you're safe.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm a bit rusty now. I can understand what you're saying, but speaking I'm a little bit rusty.
Give it a whirl, sure.
I'll tell you, tá mé chun búla san ceann le mo cus. Is dige cahar minod round over the hand. Unwell Carrigan Duggery and Larry's.
Fair play, dude. What kind of shape are you in?
And you see it. You see the phenomenon with young people that there's young people that don't have any of the hang-ups of my parents' generation, or even my generation. There's people that grew up, just feeling much more confident with it, and they don't have any of that baggage, and that's the future. I've seen the future. I've seen it in small pockets of Irish communities amongst Irish people, and I see how much more sophisticated they are. They're more European. I mean, to be European is to come from somewhere. Like, if you're European, what you're really saying is like you're Italian or you're Irish, which means that you have all of these local secrets, all of this local richness. And that's what European means. European isn't some big, empty parliament building where everyone goes and sits in this sort of IKEA, contraption that looks like a sort of like empty room. Like, no, Europe is the details of where we come from. It's the hamlets, it's the villages, the valleys, it's the locality, and that means that you come to Europe with that. So for Irish people to go to Europe without Irish it's to go like an imposter. It's to be like an American pretending to just be something that they're not. It's really to be a European, if you're Irish, means that you speak Irish. That's really what a European means,
What has been Irish people's reactions to you speaking Irish, like as a returned Irish American? Are people supportive? Are they secretly jealous? Is there a bit of shame? Or...
It's every reaction. Like I've had just deeply positive and great, enriching art rich. Like there's all sorts of wonderful experiences. I've had some negative ones too, but that goes with anything.
Yeah,
it's just yeah.
Yeah, well, I think on the whole, Irish people would be really happy that there's another person continuing the language trail, and can we be a true nation without the language? Now, I'd like to refer back to the Welsh. I mean, they have their language, but they don't really have their independent nation. I mean, it's great to have their language, but,
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, a language is, the world is an English-speaking world. So to have a nation means to have something other than English. If you have English, then you're just part of the mainstream. But to have a nation is to have another language, is to have something else. I think of America as an empire. I don't think of it as a nation. I think it's a collection of people that come from everywhere, and they retain. Mexicans are still Mexican in America. They retain their national identity, and nationhood is not a passport. Nationhood is a kinship. Our nationhood is kinship, and the only way for kin to maintain our history and connectivity is by maintaining the sparkle of our biology. The sparkle of our biology is the culture, and that culture is, in the Irish, is a literary one. So our literature, which goes back to Finn McCool and beyond, is written, and it's written in two languages. It's written in Irish, most splendidly and most anciently in Irish, and it refers to an ancient Irish literature that continues all through those thousands of years into the present. And so if that's lost, then we don't have a claim to that literature. We don't have a claim to that continuous nation. And so the hegemony of Ireland comes from that. It comes from that literature. And it has to be maintained if we want this country to remain independent and alive. If we lose our language, our nation will die. We will just become an English-speaking, region.
Well, that's a good point, Brennan. I mean, I guess then, if going from that, if you think of it, then that the Welsh actually do have their nation, just it's not official or it's not in line, So it's when they're conversing with like-minded Welsh speakers, for them in that moment it is their nation. So
there's theory. The Declan Kyberd, the literary critic in Irish, he's at Notre Dame now, but he basically makes that point. It's something happened if you compare the Irish and Welsh. The Welsh maintained their nation in their language. It was the only way they could keep their kinship. But the Irish somehow changed our sense of Irishness to political ideologies. So we believed in the treaty, or we didn't believe in the treaty. And somehow, if you believed in the treaty or you didn't believe in the treaty, that was Irishness. And then what happens is, in 10 years, there's no treaty to argue about.
Yeah.
And so then the ideology, it's like, so Irishness can disappear when you change your mind. So if Irishness in the 1980s was to believe that Bobby Sands was an Irish nationalist who died to preserve Ireland for the Irish, but then Sinn Féin changes its mind and says, no, Irishness is a rainbow flag for anyone who lands here, then it fleets. It becomes meaningless. So we need the language to maintain our kinship. Without the kinship, and our kinship is our language is our last names, like our names. Like there's our language connects us into our kinship, into our surnames, into our relationships, our family relationships. We have to maintain those if we want to maintain our kinship.
Well, I called my son Niall as well, and he was born in Switzerland, so.
That's very important. Yeah,
it's something it's kind of one of those Irish things, isn't it? Really, that they love, even just the names. The names are beautiful anyway. Beautiful Irish names.
Sure. The sound, the ceolmhar, the musicality of Irish has to be appreciated too. Like, the names are beautiful. Our language has a beautiful music to it, and we should appreciate it.
Just a small bit about the music. I mean, you play the fiddle a lot, or you play Irish music, or?
I was just always playing, and in the last 6 months, I was attacked at a session, and I've just been disconnected from the session scene in Galway, and so I haven't been playing as much as I want. But a good friend of mine in Knocknacara has gotten his mandolin again, and we're starting to play again, and it's brought me back to my music, and so I have to tell you, I went through about 6 months of mourning, and not playing. So I'm getting back into it. Yeah.
And what songs do you mostly play? What kind of tunes do you do?
Well, I've studied Carolyn a lot in the last year. I had been more so last year than this year, but so the Irish composer Carolyn and that style of music, that sort of Baroque type of style. But I love sessions for the repertoire that I grew up in, and I recognize it. I'm not as masterful a fiddle player as people that play. I have a different attitude towards Irish music than a lot of Irish musicians that grew up in it in a different way than I did. I come at it from a different angle, and it's not masterful. I don't think of myself as a master musician the way I know other Irish musicians are. But I have my own take on it, and it's authentic because I grew up listening to this music and learning to play it as best I could. So yeah, I'm grappling with my musical identity. I also love Irish songs. I love you know, all the old great songs, and so yeah.
And I know you played you said you played in a few Irish pub sessions. Do they live up to the hype? You know, coming from America.
Yeah, sure. Well, the sessions in America I found can often be quite good. And the ones here, it can be wonderful too. So yeah, every session is unique. It's like every session is like a conversation. You know, it's like you have one instrument talking, and then you have another instrument talking with them, and so it's just a conversation. It's very unique music in that way, because you basically have instruments that are talking to each other more than they're performing to the audience. We're more concerned with the tune that the musician's playing than we are with the people listening.
Yeah.
So it's like an experience for us rather than for them. Now that's not always the case. I mean, you get on a stage and Irish music can rock any house, and I've seen Carnegie Hall explode in standing ovations to Irish music. But Irish music in the sweetest form is that where just musicians are swapping tunes and sort of listening to each other's grace notes and trying to get the melody right, and you know, so
yeah. Well, Irish music is extremely popular this side of the world, so you know. Let's move on to religion then.
Subjects.
Yeah, so your video on YouTube entitled "A Defense of Irish Catholicism," I thought was excellent. It was very good, and I have to say it was very inspiring as well. And it's exactly how I feel about it. I do feel that Ireland and Catholicism, for better or for worse, and it's been an awful lot worse in the last few years. But anyway, it's the religion of our ancestors. That's how I feel, and if it was good enough for Brian Boru and you know and people like that, I mean, it's just the way we are. And also, as you said, like with the Dark Ages, we the Irish reinvigorated the continent of Europe with learning and study and passing on the ancient texts, etc., etc. So perhaps, as you said in the video, it might be left to us again to carry the good fight in the future. Who knows if things continue to get gradually worse. And with that, for example, I can tell you in Switzerland, I mean, the lovely city of St. Gallen was set up by an Irish monk, St. Gallus, you know, and there's still a connection. I mean, their football team wears green, and but anyway, and so there's many places in Central Europe with an Irish monastic tradition, which was important centres of learning and study, and you know, it got Europe back after the Dark Ages, back into a restorative period. So, what's my question there?
I know exactly where you're coming from. I think the same way.
Yeah. So why is it important then to keep our Christianity? Why is it important to keep our Catholicism?
let's say even as a tourist, just like you said, I mean, what a pleasure it is to go to St. Gallen. I haven't been there, but I've been dreaming of St. Gallen for some time. There's cities all over Germany and France that claim an Irish patron saint as the founder of their town or their city. I mean, that alone is a reason to maintain Irish Catholicism, because, I mean, we have this connection to Europe through our faith. We also have one of the most beautiful Christian traditions of any nation. You know, we're the Irish Church is something like Armenia in a way. You know, it's its own thing. You know, our saints are just very special saints. There was one of the priests in Mayo. I can't remember his name, which I'm embarrassed by, like Griffith or something like that, Father Griffith or something. He founded the Knock Airport. You know. And what an honor to have been visited by our Blessed Virgin Mary, our Blessed Mother, came to Ireland, you know, to visit us in Ireland, because we're a spiritual land, and she didn't visit everywhere, you know. So, and when he built the airport, you know, he said, let's say a prayer to all the Irish saints, you know, all the Irish saints in heaven. And there are so many. We have such a beautiful tradition of holy people. You know, my father's family in Longford they live in Ballymahon, and they're right next to Clonmacnoise, and those monastic universities that the Irish built on the Shannon, they're such spiritual places. But like, we have a piper in our family there. He's long dead now, but he was my father's uncle, and his name was Uncle P. And he was a fire chief in Dublin, but he was such a deeply holy man. Like, it's like there's an Irish holiness that is so beautiful. Like, it's such and I knew them from my father's parents' generation, that some of his family members were like just blessed. They were holy. They were like saints, and it's our tradition produced a quality of goodness that's so beautiful and so special. Like, Irish goodness is so beautiful. It's so worth perfecting and propagating and making popular. You know, like, when Irish people are good, it can be so good. You know, it can be so beautiful and so worthwhile, and it's so creative too. So yeah, we have an spiritual tradition. You know, some quality that's coming from, and that's coming from our religion from so long, and for having kept it for so long, the eternal flame of a good soul, and it's part of Irish character, and it can be extinguished. Irish people are not destined to remain holy. Like, we can become very evil, and we have to be worried that our nation not become a cesspit of evil, that we not become an evil people, you know, and we have to be aware of that possibility. We have to fight off evil, you know.
So I have two questions then. Can you be a true Irish patriot? I mean, this is a question that a lot of people ask. Can you be a true Irish patriot and not a Catholic or not a Christian?
Well, I mean, yeah, but I don't see the point of Irish nationalism unless it includes a spiritual commitment, and I think the commitment should remain Christian for this reason, because the Christian model of kingship, of leadership, is one where the Christian would sooner die than betray. That like, Christ's example is that he died as a king. Like, he went into Jerusalem as a king on Palm Sunday, and they murdered him. But he did that like a king, and that's what a king is. A king is not somebody that, you know, runs away from the battlefield. It's not somebody who's afraid of dying, because if you die for your people, it's a martyrdom. It's a splendid example or standard. And so, I mean, to be an Irish patriot, if you're not, I don't know, you can do that in a pagan mode, maybe. Like, you can say, oh, I'll die. Like, and we do have that. We have that sort of pagan example.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I mean, what about paganism in Ireland? Because
Yeah.
is there not there is a clear connection in our identity with our pre-Celtic and Celtic traditions as well, you know, so.
Yeah, yeah. Like I was just about to say, Cuchulainn is our pagan defender. So I called it a Christian example or standard of kingship. But Cuchulainn
Just sorry, 1 second.
he defended the children of Ireland. He defended our people. But that I was saying that Cuchulainn is our pagan example, and Cuchulainn fought to defend his people, and that idea of Cuchulainn living up to that standard is what the Irish monks who wrote down our pagan heritage were saying is that, and St. Patrick makes this ruling, St. Columba makes the same ruling. St. Columba is a good example. St. Columba gathered all the princes, all the bards, and all the monks of Ireland together into a parliament at Drumket in 532 AD, sometime like that. And he brought them together, and there was a controversy. It was between the pagans and the Christians. And the pagan bardic order, which is where Columba came from, was actually a prince, and he was a bard himself. There was the monks were complaining, and the kings were complaining that these pagan bards were too powerful. Maybe they should be cut back and everything be Christianized. And Columba said, absolutely not. He said that we need the pagan order, the bardic tradition, to maintain the glory of Ireland. And so our pagan tradition is part of our heritage that the Christian monks gave us. The Christian monks ensured that we not lose our ancient history. That we did not begin with St. Patrick. We go back 1,000 years and more before St. Patrick. And St. Patrick encountered our pagan tradition, and he helped us erase from it cannibalism and evil. But they did not insist that we erase our beautiful parts, that we have our Celtic artwork, our interlace, our mathematical minds, our attitude towards stonemasonry, all of these different things that we had long before Christianity. So that's why I call myself an Irish Catholic. It's because I have that heritage that I can draw on, and I don't have to. I'm not obligated by anyone, by Christ or by St. Patrick or by anyone, to disavow my pagan past. I just disavow cannibalism. I disavow human sacrifice. I disavow faction fighting and civil war. But no, it's very important that our pagan past is a deep and important part of us.
Yeah, that's true. I agree.
But all under Christ. Christ is the King of the universe. So there's one God, and our God is Christ, and Christ is a man, and our God is human and humane.
So how did you feel about the abortion referendum? I mean, were you surprised?
Abortion is the most important issue, because it goes to the heart of human rights, because human rights is all based upon a concept of a human, by the very fact of their being a human, is because they are a human endowed with inalienable rights. They cannot be taken from a human being because they are a human being. And so if you are a human being, you have a right to exist and to thrive and not be murdered. It's so fundamental. So abortion is the most important problem, and I'm not giving a simple answer on it, but you have to begin with that point, that the human identity is first. So if someone says to me that they need to have an abortion, they need to first address that point. You have to explain how you think you can violate the human right of that human being with that human heart and those human fingers and those human eyes and that developing brain. You have to explain that. So the fact is, though, that and this is why I'm very sensitive about hard cases. And I'll just say this one point: we have to understand hard cases in a very sensitive way, and this is the big issue. So hard cases is really where the debate is. To me, the debate has to go around hard cases. So we have to talk about hard cases and what it means for a woman to discover that her fetus has deformities or has some kind of problem. And in that case, I think we have to talk about abortion in a different way. But when it comes to aborting a healthy human fetus, you know, you cannot propagate the idea that is like normal. There's nothing normal about ending a human life because you want to. You have to make an exceptional argument to murder someone. If you're going to murder someone, the state wants to murder someone in the name of capital punishment. That's an extraordinary claim of power over another person. So if a woman wants to make that same type of extraordinary claim, it has to come from a much deeper philosophical rationale than I just want to.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen, though.
I didn't like the way the debate went at all. I thought it was, and I thought our human rights in Ireland were aborted. I think that's what, you know.
But the thing is, it's not like, I know we've been talking about religion, but it's not a religious issue at all. It's just a fundamental human right, as you said. It's like a heartbeat there, and that's it, you know.
I mean, I think that's the starting place. I think every conversation has to begin with abortion is about murder. And so to murder someone is an extraordinary act. Now, if you're going to justify murder, murder is sometimes justified in war. It's sometimes justified in medical procedures that are like about euthanasia. There are certain ethical boundaries where murder is accepted, but they're extraordinary.
With all the church scandals in Ireland, can you understand why Irish people have turned against the church in the last 10, 20 years? I mean, the church, even today, it's rotten to the core, you know, so...
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's rotten to the core, but yeah, I know what you mean. There was a controversy, a heretical movement in the time of St. Augustine, and it was called Donatism. And the argument was that church, in order for it to be valid, must be populated by a pure priesthood. The priests have to be pure if the church is to claim to be significant. And it's been denounced as a heresy, that viewpoint, and I think for good reason, because the fact is the church is populated by the people in the pews, by the congregations, by the priests themselves, by the nuns, by the laity, and everyone. It's the priest is a community. The church is a community. So you know, if the community starts watching television and starts taking its moral guidance from television and starts to create a moral system from another cultural source outside of the church or just from inclinations or whatever, you can create a sick culture. And I think the sick culture entered into the church. You know, there's the church, however, having said that, is so disappointing. I can't even describe how disappointing the church is. I find the failure of priests to be so reprehensible.
You see Dermot Martin like denying people mass at the moment with the lockdown. I mean, I don't know, are the churches even open? Can you walk into a church? And
no, it's shocking. And well, not here, not out here. Yeah, I mean, there's this movement in the penal times in 18th century Ireland during the 1700s when they disallowed church gatherings. They said the Irish Catholic could not congregate, and the Irish priests were being hunted down. They were literally paying priest hunters to go and find priests and kill them. There's a famous story of a priest that was being hunted and was laid in wait and pounced on the priest hunter and killed the priest hunter. It's like there's a great story for this, but they were all heroic stories of spirituality, saying no matter what the British do, we are not going to give up our faith. And so there's a famous song about that called "Out to Egangari," "Were You at the Rock?" And it's about how the Irish would meet at a rock, and we turned these old megalithic stones into makeshift altars and held mass out in the wilds outside of the authority, under threat. If we were caught by the yeomanry, they would butcher us. So we maintained our faith under those conditions. So, and priests put their lives on the line, you know. But to watch priests avoid sanction.
Singing and dancing priests now we have. They're all on TV and everything, singing songs and dancing. It's like ridiculous stuff, you know.
Yeah, they've taken the. There's a crisis. That's a whole big discussion. I have a fondness for Malachi Martin, the Irish. I keep calling him he wasn't a saint, but he was a great man, and he diagnosed what was happening in the Catholic Church from the perspective. He was an intellectual from County Kerry, and his view of it is that the church has been infiltrated by negative forces. So I think that's pretty true.
I just one more with religion. I mean, so how would you tie this in with running a country? I mean, do you think there should be a separation of church and state? And
I understand the point. The church and state are, if you look at it anthropologically, like the idea of the church and state is not an anthropological reality. Like if you look at monkeys in a cage, you know, there's sort of a hierarchy, and they create a sort of society. And so human beings are like that also. You know, the way the Irish Christian state in Fado was organized is like, it was an anthropological model also. You had like a king and a spiritual leader, and they were contemporaneous. They were in their powers. They checked each other in a way. So, like anthropologically, I think the government is a religion. I think Dáil Éireann is religious. I think they behave like a priesthood. I think that the Taoiseach is a spiritual position. I think that the Taoiseach is like a spiritual position, and you know, and the politicians aren't spiritual people. Like they're not. They don't care more about the people than they do themselves. But with a priesthood, they're obligated to do so. Like they should. So I'm not saying that church and state should be merged. I'm thinking Irish nationhood, the government, should be spiritual and holistically spiritual. I think there should be a spiritual purpose to Ireland, and it should be founded on human rights. The human right is that a person has a right to exist and to thrive, and that destitution is abolished in Ireland. That you cannot be devastated in Ireland as a way of sanctioning people. You know, I think there's a standard that is a spiritual principle that should be part of our politics. How that's organized, I don't mean it as emergence of church and state. I'm saying that, but we have to think about like what it means to say you're taking the spirituality out of government, like secularism. Like, what does that mean? Does that means that they can turn us into slaves of a computer? Like, I mean, what if they just turn everything into a shopping mall? Like, is that okay? And like, the secular state is pretending like it is okay.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Well,
there has to be a critique of the secular state. Is my point. Let's stop pretending that the secular state is obviously superior to a spiritual state. You know, Tibet is a spiritual state. The Tibetan government was a religious theocracy, and it's not necessarily evil. I'm not saying it's the answer, but I'm saying that we have to consider that if your politicians are not deeply spiritual people, then they might be greedy and they might abuse us. And it might be a spiritual problem, you know. I'm sorry to go on about that, but
no, you're making good points. I mean, well, there's a number of things you could say there. I mean, look at the countries that abandoned any notion of spirituality, like Russia, Stalinist Russia, and communist China. Like, I mean, places like that were pretty much hellholes. But and then that kind of goes back to what we were saying. Maybe the quality of the politician we should be electing is someone with a more less mechanical and more someone who's open to spirituality, is open to the culture, open to the nation, who we are, the soul of the nation, So it's probably the quality of the politicians we're electing. But I remember in the abortion referendum, an RT and Declan Lynch was writing in The Independent, and it was a very nasty piece. He was saying and he was saying that the pro-lifers were all their views were dictated by religion, which was totally not true. It was as we saying, it was the argument about the heartbeat, the human life. It wasn't. I didn't hear much people talking about religion in the debate, but because they're so fanatical, it was all about religion in his eyes, but it wasn't really. But he was saying we should take morality out of the debate, and I was like, your morals are bad. Morals are bad, is it? Like, to have no morals going into, that's it's either one or the other. You have this kind of run a country like with no soul, no morals, no righteous thinking, just run it like a business, and then see how we end up.
That's so right. It makes no sense. That his position makes no sense. There is no difference between morality and the law and ethics. Like we pretend these words are so different, but basically they're all the same. Like, the academics are a priesthood, the politicians are a priesthood, the priests are a priesthood. The leaders of our organizations are like priests. They have a moral responsibility to their people.
Yeah.
And if you give them the excuse that they don't have to live up to an ethics because they're secular, it's just a word game. It's like, what does religion mean anyway? I mean, if you look at the word, it comes from the word legere. Legere is the root of the word legislation. So it's basically, I mean, it's law, like it's order. I mean, religion is just basically means law and order. That's basically what religion means,
And it's inherent in all of us. We all know natural law. We do know right and wrong. So so how can we get Irish people? How can we reconnect with our Christianity? How would we get back to the religion?
I mean, I connect to the land. So I find the spiritual places in the land, and many of those places are populated by churches. So you'll find, like just down the road, there's St. Bricon's well, and St. Bricon was the saint that came and brought writing and culture to this area of Connemara in the 6th century AD. It's a very long time ago. And then he has a school, and then next to the school is our church. So, I think the sacrament of the Eucharist is the most profound sacrament in any religion, and it is the sacrament to get holy so that you can receive the Eucharist. So whatever it takes for you to be worthy of receiving the Eucharist, and just get into the headspace of the Eucharist and getting into the place where you receive it unironically, I think that's how we reconnect. I mean, and then the rest of it is difficult. Like, I know the priests, they may not say stuff I want to, there's all sorts of problems. Like I don't like the new stained glass windows. I don't like some of the But for me, it's the Eucharist is the center of our religion. It's the Holy Saturday. It's the Last Supper. It's the immovable feast. It's what Christ gave us as our central ritual. So I think it's of all the rituals I've ever experienced or encountered. There's nothing like it. There's no theater that's more profound. If you really understand it and get into it, I think that's the way to get back to spirituality.
You're a keen student. You're a keen student of Padraig Pearse. I mean, what can we learn from Pearse looking at the Ireland of 2020?
We can find in him one of the great modernist writers of, I think, European literature. I think what he contributed to European identity, it goes well beyond Ireland. He was a great school teacher, a founder of a new way of learning, and I think he should be understood as someone who gave us a school system that Irish people should be very proud of. And he's the first president of the Republic. He was a poet, and he was called by William Butler Yeats, who I mean, there's no writer more revered, no poet is more revered than William Butler Yeats. And it was William Butler Yeats who called Padraig Pearse our Perseus, who rode the winged horse, our Pegasus. So it was the greatest poet in the world telling us that Padraig Pearse was worthy of the Pegasus of Ireland, which is the poet's animal. The Pegasus is the winged horse that brings one to the Elysian fields where the poetry of a civilization is to be found. So Pearse is totally underrated. He is a genius and a great founding father. He's a splendid man, and he cared for real. He truly cared, and that's another quality of Irish. So as an Irish leader, he cared, and he cared truly, and he cared so deeply he was able to synthesize our literary tradition into a modernist movement that produced an entire literature that is still alive today. When they shot Pearse, they killed off a generation of poets. They killed off a literary movement. They killed off an entire body of literature. It was like they burned a museum to the ground. And in that way, we have to restore it, we have to, and the Pearse Cottage is just down the road from where I live. And it's very important that we visit it, that we make pilgrimage to that place, and that we recognize what he recognized. And he recognized in the people of Connemara a spiritual people who had retained a soul that was worthy of nationhood, and that others should find it and should refresh their national spirit in what was available to us here on the west coast of Ireland. And now it's more widely available. I mean, Irish culture is much more widespread today than it was in his day. So he succeeded in getting Irish culture to revive and to renaissance. And so he's the founder of our Renaissance. And if we want to be a sophisticated European people, we have to return to Padraig Pearse and understand him again.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying, like the people that, for example, people in 1916, they were idealists, they were poets, writers, musicians, they weren't, I mean, so again, as we were saying, maybe these are the kind of people we need for the new Ireland,
Yeah.
At
first, that was a great point. What if our political class were creative and artistic? Yeah, wouldn't that be, and just, greedy,
Yeah, because it's not all about GDP, So looking at your videos, I mean, you were saying a few of the themes, for example, so the nation, and relating to Padraig Pearse, the nation is sacred, it's something to be worshipped, and we are the custodians, caretakers, and it's our duty to pass it on. I mean, so is this a homeland? Is it important for the Irish diaspora as the people in the island?
Oh my God, it is. It is the homeland of our ethnicity, our kinship, our people are scattered across the Anglophonic world. So we have Irish colonies basically in America and Australia and New Zealand. And we also have Irish colonies in Italy, like Hugh O'Neill and Hugh O'Donnell. That's where they went. They went to Italy, and they're buried under the Scala Regia in the Vatican. You know, we have a significant diaspora, and that diaspora can be hunted down. You know, the Irish diaspora was hunted down. You know, the English assassins went and killed the O'Donnell. You know, they went and killed Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. You know, the Irish diaspora is not safe unless we understand that we have a mutual interest, which is that we have to protect our children and our people from those that want to see us dead. And in doing so, we have to be ambassadors of neighborly love, because the Irish recognize that we're hunted in the same way that people from Ghana are hunted, or people from Latin America are hunted, or Iroquois are hunted. We recognize that we were hunted and are still hunted. And because we're hunted, other people are hunted. And we who are hunted can understand that we have a mutual protection that we can provide each other. And the Irish can lead. I think they would lead that. You know, John F. Kennedy founded the Peace Corps. You know, I think that we would lead that if we were better with each other. That if the Irish were connected to each other, and the way to connect the Irish diaspora is in the homeland. Ireland is the place where we connect. One of the O'Clerys were active in the time. They were the Four Masters, and they fled Ireland in that period, and they returned in 1623. Micheál O'Clery returned with his brother and the masters, and they went around, or I think Micheál went around Ireland collecting manuscripts and saving them. He compiled them into the Anala Riach the Naharan, the annals of the Four Masters. And the manuscripts our literature is, we're like the people of the book. I mean, the Jews are said to have retained their nationhood in their Torah, and the Irish retained our nation in the Chronicles of Ireland, in our manuscripts. So we know, and we have a very rich manuscript tradition that relates to our surnames, like our names, our histories are found in those books. So I can find the Keane in those books, and I can find my genealogy, I can find my history there, and it's very important. I mean, it's also like, and then science converges with this, because then later science starts doing DNA testing and all sorts of different things, and they find, like, Niall of the Nine Hostages, or Niall Nigilach, like, they find his DNA is like important haplogroup in European ancestry. And you know, I mean, that type of stuff, like, there's a good reason to be proud of and to retain that heritage, and those books are holy, you know.
I'm just a Norman Blowen, though. my surname.
Oh, no, I don't mean just Gaelic. The Norman infusion was across Europe. The Normans infused themselves into every European nation, from Sicily to Ireland to... The Normans represent almost like a modernist period, like a modernist period in history. And so to have Norman, I think of Irish people as Gaelic Norman. I think all the Gaelic families married into the Norman, and all the Norman families married into the Gaelic. Yeah. And so we're Gaelic Normans. Some of us come up with Norman names, some of us come up with Gaelic names, but for the most part, we're just the same. Yeah.
Became more Irish than the Irish themselves, is not to say. Just lastly on the sense of homeland. I mean, the modern world, this doesn't compute. You know, I mean, the sense of patriotism, it just doesn't fit into the world of globalization and progressive liberal thought. I mean, this is ancient thinking. They're trying to park it into the past,
Well, I mean, it's also the Charter of the United Nations. I mean, it's the most important modernist document of post-World War II period. It talks exactly like I do. I mean, the United Nations Charter clarifies what I'm saying as a legal document more clearly than any other globalist document. All the globalist documents that call for, corporations to own us all and to put barcodes across our forehead, none of those are legal. None of those are, they're all traitorous, illegal plans. None of those things are to be accepted by those that accept the United Nations. We accept that there's a post-World War order, and that post-World War order grants us the Charter of National Liberties. And so my thinking is modern and comes from that charter. Yeah. I believe in the United Nations. I believe in. I might not actually believe in the United Nations itself as an institution, but the principles of its founding are the most peaceful, sacred document the modern secular world has ever come up with. So there's nothing inconsistent with that I'm saying. Everything I say is consistent with those concepts.
Just before we wrap it up, Brendan, I feel we should briefly mention your dealings with the anti-fascists. I wouldn't say like a collective; it's just a certain individuals looking at your video, and I'll direct people to your videos for a clearer explanation on that. But perhaps just a few brief questions. I mean, essentially, why are they picking on you?
Well, there's a misunderstanding. I think there has been a shift in the generation that came after my generation. I think that younger generation has been just drinking down mainstream media as though the oligarchs that own that media, the corporations, are somehow a good source for ethical thinking. Instead of being critical of media, they accept everything the media says as though it were gospel. And to me, that's just ridiculous servitude to the corporate order. So I'm against the corporate order. I believe that the national order is the path of human rights. But somehow they've been tricked into believing that the corporate order is the way to go. And they pretend they're fighting the corporate order, but they're serving it because they're totally consistent with the messages on TV, which are all about race baiting and creating these divisions that are cancerous, and they're not critical. They're not critically looking or analyzing the way these corporate entities are shaping our nations and our lands and our homelands, and they're thinking it's all good. Everything is good. All is good, except the assertion of nationhood, which is kinship. So they're at war with kinship. They're at war with family structures, with family life, with the idea of making this world safe for our families. And they do it in a moral determinism. They feel that there's a determined moral cause. They feel that there's a rhetorical morality that they don't want to violate. And I'm very sensitive to that because I as far as I see myself, I'm as liberal and more liberal than anyone. I mean, I'm not. I'm an anti-corporatist. I think the corporations are a threat to humanity, and I think that the only way to fight them is from the nations and kinship groups. The human kinship is the way to fight the corporations, and I got to this view from indigenous rights. I believe in indigenous rights. I believe in indigenous rights for the Irish, just as I believe that the Iroquois have those rights, and so I think they just misunderstand me, and they have, I just think they misunderstand,
Well, that's a very positive way of putting it. I mean, it doesn't, like you're saying, it doesn't have to be so negative. There doesn't have to be so much fighting about this. I mean, it's like simple discussion about what you believe, and
right.
I mean,
well, they shout you down. It's basically anti-discursive censoriousness. They look at someone speaking, and if they tag you with a cartoon and say, "Oh, you're a cartoon," then they'll call you a cartoon, and they'll just keep cartooning the person, and that cartooning is against all thinking, against all conversation, instead of a debate. I love debate. I love discussing. I love getting into details. I love art. I love difference. I love discussing difference. But they avoid it like dogmatic servants, basically, of the televised world. They basically the personalities on television, and they believe those people on TV. They believe those liars on television, lying to them and filling their heads with misdirection, red herrings, and they follow the Judas goat like lambs to the slaughter, and they miss the intellectualism of debating with someone that disagrees with them. They don't have the experience of disagreement, whereas someone like me is so used to having to defend different ideas that we're able to discuss things, and we enjoy debate. They look at debate as heresy. They're dramatic, you know.
Well, I think it's very telling with the anger. I mean, it's like it reflects badly on a person when they get angry at certain things, that they can't just rationalize it and debate it. They just get angry, and they're jealous that people like us are more relaxed. You know, can tease out ideas by talk, and you know, I'm happy. You're happy. You seem fairly joyful in your, you know, your, you know, in your surroundings, and they hate that. They absolutely hate it. They want us to be moping around, crying about the end of the world or something. I don't know. So I hope.
I don't mock them though. I'm not mocking them. I see. To me, they're just James Connolly. And James Connolly agreed with the way I think. James Connolly believed in indigenous rights. I know James Connolly's literature, and I'm consistent with James Connolly. I'm not a communist, and I don't think he was even a communist. I think he was a labor rights leader. But at some point, James Connolly will see Padraig Pearse as an ally, and they will fight together. And once James Connolly fight together, we'll win. But as long as they have us separated, they won't. But they have Padraig Pearse and James Connolly have to come together, and they have to stop accusing each other of evil. You know, James Connolly is not evil. He believes in paddy. He believes that the working class people should not get shafted by these corporate vultures coming in and stealing their future. And Padraig Pearse believes that the people have a right to exist, and that we have a magnificent spiritual tradition that is part of who we are. And if we don't have that, we won't have any liberation. If we lose our soul, we're going to be enslaved to something else. And so he recognizes that we have to marry the two understandings of Irishness, which is that we believe in labor rights, we believe in a fair deal, and we believe in the right of our people to grow and thrive in our own renaissance, in our own selfhood, in our own personhood. That there's to true diversity, and that true diversity means that we get to exist, and that we get to talk about who we are, you know, and that's what Pearse does. He recognizes that we don't exist if we don't exist. If they abolish the right to even talk about Irish ethnicity, if they demonize us, then we'll cease to exist. We'll have to censor ourselves out of existence, and that's a ridiculous political stance. That's not a politics at all. That's suicide.
Well,
so, yeah,
they went down together, didn't they? Pearse and Connolly, they fought side by side. You know, I mean, you know, so that says it all. I hope this episode doesn't put you off your love of living in the west of Ireland, and I hope you will carry on with your good works and don't let the bastards grind you down.
No, not at all. I've not been so encouraged in weeks, so I can't thank you enough for taking the time and talking to this frickin' Yank.
No, it's pleasure's been mine. So I think we've covered an awful lot, and thanks for giving me your valuable time, your thoughts, and special insight. And I've learned a lot as well along the way, so thanks for that. Just to finish, people can check you out on your YouTube at Alternative Irish Media. Do you have a Facebook or a Twitter as well?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on YouTube at AIM Alternative Irish Media. I'm on Facebook. You can find my details on one of those videos. I should put them.
I leave the links below. And how is your YouTube site going? I mean, you've been pretty busy the last few days.
Oh, it's going okay. You know, I have It's just a little site, you know. It's just I do it for myself and for my friends. It's instead I don't like typing on Facebook. I think it's no one reads and it doesn't. I like if I'm going to make a statement, I'll put it into a little video, and it take longer. It'd take a week to do it, and then I enjoy the feedback on that more than I do on tweets. Tweets don't do it for me. Yeah.
Well, it's the same with me with my little channel. It's get it off my chest, and
the same view. We're at the same level. We're doing the same type of thing. So,
and I'm meeting loads of people, even if my thing is small, So thanks, Brendan, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
God bless. Slán agus Banach.